Hello everyone! For today's lesson we're going to be taking a little look at ancient Egyptian society. Now we need to understand what the word society means. So society are the groups of people that make up a society, and within those groups of people you might have rich people, we might have poor people, we might have old people, young people, men and women, and within that as well we're going to have lots of different beliefs, education, writing, entertainment, art. All those come together to make a society. So let's have a little look at what ancient Egyptian society looked like. Oh, history. Right, so Egyptian society then. Well, we've got this triangle that shows how ancient Egypt made up its society, and there's a reason that quite a lot of societies are shown in a triangle. Now have a think. Why might a triangle be good to show the makeup of a society? Have a think. Have a little think. Well, it's because a triangle has got a top and a bottom. The top is really narrow and the bottom is really wide. Now we'll just kind of ignore that for the minute. Now the top is where you're going to have very few people. So just like today, there are very few people who are at the top of society, but there are quite a lot of people who are at the bottom of society. So that means the top of society is very narrow, but the bottom of society is very wide, which is why we have this triangle. So we're going to go through each of these various parts of society and we'll explain what they are. So at the top we've got the pharaoh. Underneath that we've got the government officials, the nobles and the priests, and we'll explain what all those are. Then we've got soldiers, which is quite interesting to see them quite high up in this triangle. Then we've got scribes, who are kind of the educated people. We've got merchants underneath those as we're heading towards the bottom of the triangle. Then we've got craftsmen underneath that, and then we've got farmers and slaves who are at the bottom. So let's take a look at each of these different aspects and see what they are. But have a think in your head. How does that compare with today in our country? Not today in Egypt, how does it compare today in our country? Now we need to talk about women in ancient Egypt as well, because it's very interesting comparing the roles of men and women in these different civilizations. When it comes to somewhere like ancient Greece or the Romans, then women didn't really have many rights and they were seen as kind of inferior. They weren't seen as important as men. But in ancient Egypt, women had the same rights and the same independence as men to a large extent. They were able to own their own houses, they were able to marry whoever they wanted, they were able to divorce people, adopt children, and they were able to have any number of positions and different jobs and things. But a lot of this depended on where they were in society. So if you were born into a very poor family, then there was virtually no chance of getting a really important position high up near the pharaoh. But it's important to note as well that women could be pharaohs as well. They could be leaders, they could be queens. And we also know that there were lots of female goddesses as well. So women were seen as fairly equal. So pharaohs. Well, the pharaohs were the kings or queens of Egypt. They were the most rich and the most powerful, who decided everything about the country, and they were almost seen as gods, and some of them were worshipped as gods. And as rulers of the country, they could decide whatever. If they wanted a law, they could bring that law in. If they wanted somebody dead, see you later, pal, you're dead. There wasn't really anybody there to question them. And there was only one at a time. There was only one pharaoh at a time who ruled over everyone and everything. And they controlled all of the land and everything within the land, maybe apart from some religious aspects. But ultimately, everything belonged to them. So they could just call upon that and say, right, you own it, but it's actually mine. I'm going to take it. I'm going to have it. Thank you very much. How is that different from today in Britain? Well, we've got a prime minister who kind of leads the country, but we also have lots and lots of people who can question the prime minister. And if the prime minister wants to bring a law in about something, they have to go through lots and lots of different stages to get that done. The prime minister can't just say, I want this law that says give me all of your money, or everybody has to wear a hat on Tuesday. It has to go through lots and lots of different people who will either say yes or no, and if too many people say no, then it won't go through. So it's not quite the same as it is today. Underneath them, we've got the government officials who were known as the viziers or the viziers, and they were the second most powerful people of Egypt. They helped the pharaohs rule, and they were high judges in court. They were the people to talk to if you needed to speak with the pharaoh. So have a think about today. Do we still have lots of government officials, people just underneath the Prime Minister who help the Prime Minister and who you can speak to instead of the Prime Minister? On the same level as them, we had the nobles, and the nobles ran the provinces of Egypt. Now, nobles means rich and important kinds of people, and provinces mean the cities that controlled certain areas of Egypt. And they made the local laws as well. And then this job was passed down through different families. So, generally, if you had a father who had a son, then the job of looking after certain things within the city would be passed down to the son, and so on and so on and so on. Same level, again, we've got the priests, and the priests kept the gods happy. They worked in temples and carried out ceremonies and rituals for different people. Now, it's really interesting to note that priests and religion is fairly high up on this triangle, which suggests that religion was really, really important. So if we have a little think about today, do you think that priests and those people who are in charge of the various religions, do you think that they would be as high up in society as the Egyptians had them? Or do you think they might be a bit lower? Do you think they might be even higher? Do you think that they might help rule a country? What do you think? Underneath those, on the next level, we've got soldiers. And again, this is quite interesting because soldiers are really quite high up on this triangle. They were seen as heroes for protecting the country, and they were often rewarded with land and riches. So have a think. Are our soldiers, are they rewarded with land and lots of riches? Or do you think they're a little bit lower on the triangle today? Next we have scribes, and they were the only people who could read and write, and they recorded the events of Egypt using hieroglyphics. So they were kind of like the teachers of today, and they would go off and they would teach other people how to read and write. So do we even have a scribes level of society today, or do you think sort of teachers and that kind of level are part of something different? Do you think they're higher up? Do you think they're lower down? Do you think they should be higher up or they should be lower down? Merchants, they would travel around the country and to other places and other countries to go and trade for essentials and luxuries. So merchants just kind of means traders, and they would often trade items like papyrus paper, gold and grain that was produced in Egypt, and they would trade that for wood and metal, which Egypt did not have a lot of. But actually these merchants that would go off to different countries and sell all of these things, they actually helped to make Egypt quite a wealthy country, which is really, really important. But it's interesting to see that they're fairly low down on the triangle. Next we have craftsmen, who were the skilled people who made things like pottery, cloth, jewellery, shoes, leather and statues. But they're right near the bottom, but we're saying that they're skilled. Now what's interesting to note as well is that the stuff that the merchants would sell would generally be made by the craftsmen. The merchants would go and sell what the craftsmen made. But all of that stuff that the craftsmen made would essentially belong to the pharaoh. If the pharaoh said he wanted all of that, or she wanted all of those things, you had to give them. That was it. You made them, but you had to give them to the pharaoh. Now have a think, does that work like that today? The things that people make, all of these products, the shoes, the leather, the statues, cloth, jewellery, all that kind of stuff, does that go straight to the Prime Minister? If the Prime Minister said, I want all of your stuff, could they just take it? Or can you do what you want with it? Finally, we have farmers and slaves. Now, farmers worked on the lands that belonged to the pharaoh. They were paid with food, clothes and a home. And they paid their rent with the money that they made from selling crops. Most ordinary Egyptians were farmers. And that's why, at the bottom, that's why it's the biggest. Because most people were farmers. Just like most of us today would be sort of fairly near the bottom because we're just kind of ordinary people. That's what farming was. Farming was kind of seen as an ordinary job to do. But next to that we have slaves, and slaves were usually not Egyptian as they were captured during wars. They had no rights or property of their own, they worked for rich families in the pharaoh, and they could be killed if their master died so that they could look after them in the afterlife. So slaves, right at the bottom of the pile, no rights whatsoever. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to compare each of the different levels of Egyptian society with today. So start at the top with the pharaoh. Do we have pharaohs in charge today? Or is there someone like a pharaoh today? Have a look at the next one, government officials, nobles and priests. Do we still have government officials today? Do you think they still have the same levels of power? Do we still have nobles, the people who are in charge of cities, or has their role changed? Do you think priests or anybody who's in charge of a religion, do you think they're as high up? Do you think they have as much influence and power today? What about soldiers? Do we still have soldiers today, and are they as important? Are they rewarded as well as they may have been in ancient Egyptian society? What about scribes? Do we still have teachers today, and what kind of level do you think that they're at in society? What about merchants and traders? Do you think that they still exist? Do people still go off around the world and trade? And do you think that they are at a better level or a worse level than they were in ancient Egypt? What about craftsmen? Do people still make things today? What kinds of things do people make? What about farmers? And do we still have slaves? So make your comparisons, and don't forget to send them to your teacher, because we love seeing what you come up with, and hopefully we'll see you for the next video.